Have you ever needed a text display in Minecraft, but all the options available are either too big, too small, or too manual? No? Oh, that's just me. Oh. Well, you should watch the video anyway. I made a working typewriter. It prints letters one at a time, of any font you like, and moves them along using a bar, sort of ish like a real typewriter. You can feed the paper through, and when you're done, the letters get recycled back into the system. I originally just built this version, where the alphabet is stored up here, and you input whole lines of text into here. But then I thought, damn, a typewriter would make a really good thumbnail. But I'm not going to clickbait you guys, so it would actually have to have working buttons for me to do that. But that would require completely redoing the mechanism from scratch, and no sane person would do that. So anyway, I completely redid the mechanism from scratch, and I came up with this. So in this version, you actually press these note blocks or stand on this space bar to input the letters. This one, I would say, is less practical because it's slower because all the items will get there at different times. And then also, you need 10 stacks of each of the player heads, which is not easy. So take your pick of which one you prefer. I'll explain both of them, because why not? You do obviously need to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that this uses player heads, which usually you can't obtain in survival. But basically every server I've ever been on has the player head data pack that Hermitcraft uses. So I'm just going to assume a lot of you do as well. But if you don't, it is a vanilla feature. I do want to stress that. It is completely vanilla, but in completely vanilla, no data packs Minecraft, you need to use a command to do it. It's this command here that I showed in my last video as well. These player heads I made myself, so feel free to make improvements. If you want to use this design though, it'll be in the world download. I've also saved it as a structure file within the world, this chest here. So this chest has all of the alphabet and a few extra symbols. Or there are also plenty of other typefaces you can find online for player heads. For instance, this command here, which you can find here. I made the fonts just using any Minecraft skin editor, and I tried very carefully to match the color to birch, but you can use any trapdoor here, so you can use any color combination. If someone wants to make wingdings though, please tell me. I really want to see that. So how does it work? So I would say this has 3 major components. I've actually color coordinated it this time for anybody who wants to build this themselves, which I've sort of split up here. And I want to emphasize here, each one of these was so annoying. Each one of these required like a moment of clarity. It's going to look really simple to some of you anyway. But I promise it was actually really difficult to get it to work. A lot of it requires it doesn't matter. I'll explain it. The biggest problem I found was a way to move armor stands upwards without them like collapsing into one. Okay, so I had tons of ideas for this. Most of them were rubbish. A lot of them involved something like you can press a block into an armor stand, but you can't press an armor stand into a block, which is a useful property. But then, how do you place the next armor stand? Okay, let's say this. Let's try and move this armor stand upwards. Great. Now let's put another armor stand into here. Okay, that's not working. And so I went like this for ages, and nothing worked. I tried a few other things. I tried to use powdered snow with armor stands with leather boots. That almost worked. I think there's slightly buggy behavior with that. So what we need is some block that allows armor stands to go upwards but not downwards, and then some way of pushing them into the next block. So I came up with this setup here. This took a lot of trial and error, but to get a really good display, you want the player heads to be as close to the trapdoor as possible. So it looks like one sheet of paper. Let's get Jack Black ready. By firing the armor stand over a honey block, which is 1 pixel short, as well as a chest, and then firing it 3 blocks over a half slab. Again, this took a lot of trial and error. The armor stand will then appear with less than 1 pixel of gap between itself and the trapdoor. Let's say we weren't using the trapdoors. What would happen is the armor stand gets flung here, lands in the perfect place, we can push it up, and it stays up. Next armor stand comes in. Great, they're in alignment, they're in the right place. Let's push this one up, and they fuse together. So we need a way of pushing up every single armor stand at the same time so that none of them get lumped together into one. And the way we do this is with more trapdoors. So that's what this whole screen of trapdoors is really for. It's all automated. Once you press this button, this all happens at the same time. But each of the steps goes, first, these pistons at the top are activated, which then pushes these trapdoors into the top half of the armor stand. Then we need a way to do 2 pushes. First, we need to push this trapdoor into the same block as the armor stand, and then we need to push all of the trapdoors back up to reset the system. And this double piston extender here, it needs 2 signals to activate it. And so to do that, we need to turn 1 observer pulse into 4 signals. It needs to be fired twice to... What's the opposite of retract? Tracked? I'm just going to say tracked. So first it has to tract the block, and then it has to retract it, which will have to be at specific timings. So this observer goes into this repeater, which makes the signal long enough to go into this pulse extender. The pulse extender is timed so that it will power this block when it turns on and off, with enough time for this observer to send 2 pulses into this repeater, which means this observer will detect 4 signals from this repeater when it turns on, off, on, off. So let's see this working. With that, you end up with an armor stand that is now 1 block higher. And because it was pushed with all of these trapdoors, if you send another armor stand underneath it, it will just stay 1 block apart. Perfect. Now we have a piece of paper which you can throw armor stands at with different letters on them. How do we get the letters into a line so we can throw them appropriately? And this is at least one way of doing that. This is an overcomplicated flying machine setup. It's overcomplicated because it needs to do 2 things. It needs to keep armor stands half a block apart from each other, and it needs to reset itself every line. An armor stand will be placed here on this ice. In the actual system, it's done with a dispenser, but I'm just going to do it manually here. Then it gets fired to drop onto this honey. But importantly, when it does that, a binary counter starts here. So this uses the fact that player heads are exactly half a block. If you fire the armor stand into the player head, it will fall perfectly down the half block mark. And then with the binary counter, you detect an armor stand going through it, which will then extend this block. And then instead, this will get aligned with that block. As well, this honey is then stepped forward 1 block. This is done using a kind of strange flying machine. So this is a bud-powered flying machine. This is a regular piston. This is a sticky piston. So whenever this piston is updated, it only goes forward 1 step at a time. And it does that because this sticky piston is being bud-powered by this redstone block. Through, everyone, cross it off your bingo list, quasi-connectivity. Blocks that are diagonally above pistons or sticky pistons, power them, but they don't give updates. When the sticky piston gets updated, it will push this block back. That will in turn, this piston will then be quasi-connectivity powered and push the rest of the flying machine back. This movement will then update this observer, which then powers this sticky piston, which pulls the honey block one block. That completely resets the system, but now it's transposed by one block. So this is nearly approaching the end here. And what we want to happen is, we want it so that when this honey reaches the end, all these armor stands get pushed into their appropriate positions, and then this line of honey gets reset all the way back to the start. To try and be a bit efficient with my spacing, this redstone, which is being used to quasi-connectivity power all this stuff, it turns this on signal into a single pulse. This signal gets sent boop, 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 through all this stuff to power this observer, sending this flying machine on its way. Now we need a way of putting the player heads onto the armor stands, one after the other, and when it gets to the end of the line, we need to tell it to stop putting armor stands on. And that's what this system does. This has some conditional logic, and I tried to get it as compact as I could. This chest above here has the alphabet in it, and this chest below is where you put the items in. Chests with hoppers are pretty predictable. The items come out of chests with the first item, then the second, blah, 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 and the same with hoppers. They fill up the first item first, and the first item is the first one out. That's great. Dispensers are annoying as hell. They're random, basically. I don't mean basic, they are completely random. So if you filled it with letters, it would be completely random which one was used. So they wouldn't come out in the order you place them in the chest. So we need a way of locking this hopper for exactly the right amount of time to allow one head through into this dispenser, fire it, and then allow the next one through. First, we check that this chest has any items in, because if this chest is completely empty, we don't want the system to keep going forever and just keep doing cycles and cycles. That would be very bad for your server. And then we want to initiate the system. So this is note block initiates the system. This repeater will power this block, which then powers both of these redstone. This redstone powers this repeater for 4 ticks, which turns off this torch for 4 ticks, unlocking this hopper, allowing one item to go through. But as well, this redstone gets activated, which going through this target block powers this rail, which goes through all of this delay and then into this counter. Since a line in the chest has 9 slots, and since a line of text in my display has 18, I figured I might as well use the new-ish crafters. So this is a 9 pulse generator, essentially. Well, this specific one is an 18 pulse generator. By filling the top one with 1 ingot and the bottom one with 9 nuggets, using the same trick before of creating 2 distinct signals here, this gets powered twice, which sends 18 nuggets into the system. This dispenser is then filled with items, which powers this clock, this really simple clock, which then fires it 18 times. Obviously, but I'll say it anyway. This redstone isn't powering the above crafter, so the whole system only gets activated when this observer gets activated, when this rail gets activated. So specifically, this uses a comparator to measure signal strength. So this observer will send a pulse for every change in signal strength. I just found that it was better to have short pulses. So this signal then does 3 things. This repeater first powers this sticky piston, which fires the armor stand. Then you power this dispenser to dispense a new armor stand, and then the signal comes over to here, activating this dispenser, placing on a player head. Then this repeater turns off the torch again to unlock this hopper, allow one more head to go through. And I can hear you saying it. You're saying, but Lemon, what happens when it gets to the other side? And this happens. So using the redstone block signal from before, which goes all the way around, powering this note block, this time, this note block powers this redstone, which turns off this torch, which turns off this redstone, which then unpowers this block, which turns on this torch, which is a very overcomplicated way of saying when this redstone turns on, this rail turns on, which sends a signal back into the 18-pulse system for the next line. The reason this is overcomplicated is because this needs to have some conditional logic. If this signal comes in and this chest is empty, we don't want the system to go ahead. So this torch also powers this block so that if the signal comes in here, this torch turns off, nothing happens to this power. This power stays exactly the same, so this torch doesn't get powered, so this doesn't get powered. Okay, very quickly, let's do the top. So we of course want to recycle. We're a very eco-friendly community, and the way we do that in this system is when the armor stands come up to the top, they get picked up into this water stream and moved into this central area. When the armor stand goes through this string, this observer fires, turning the two signals I mentioned before into one signal with this copper bulb. That one signal is turned into a single pulse. Then that goes into another pulse generator. The armor stands get destroyed by arrows from these dispensers here. This is the only part of the system that isn't, like, it doesn't renew itself. I tried really hard to find a good way of renewably destroying armor stands, and there are ways of doing it, but they involve stuff like having skeletons aiming at something, or maybe trident drowned. And I generally don't like using iron golems or villagers as bait for skeletons, but if you have no qualms with that, then do that. They get picked up by these hopper minecarts, which get picked up into this hopper feed, which has a normal run-of-the-mill item filter to filter out the armor stands. The armor stands will go into this water stream, being recycled back into this dispenser, and the player heads will be sent into this water stream, going back into the original chest. Just make sure you leave one head in there at all times. That way it's self-filtering. I did promise that I was going to tell you how this one works as well. This works completely differently, but also the same. When you press one of these note blocks, an observer will detect it, powering the block beneath it, powering a dropper. The dropper will fire, sending the item into this big old pool of water. The item also goes over this gold pressure plate, sending a signal up. The reason for that is that if I said a Z and then an exclamation mark, one straight after the other, it's possible that the exclamation mark could get to the end of here first. So all that happens with this is the signal from this gold pressure plate goes up to this light, so that you know you should only press another button after this light comes on, unless you really don't mind if Z is factorial or not. Instead of using sophisticated timings, this uses pure user competence. For other Minecraft Redstone people, we all know that all Redstone users are incredibly competent and they've never broken a Redstone device once. But no, the reason I didn't do anything more complicated is because it was a lot more complicated, and this was sort of just a fun extra thing. But hey, if you want to improve it, feel free, let me know if you do. The difference though is instead of the floor moving around, this time the armor stand gets fired into a different block. Here, every time this detects a new item, these repeaters get activated, and they need quite a lot of delay, so it's quite slow. This will send pulses to this. So this is a really clever redstone counter. On account of it being really clever, you can tell I didn't make it. I got it from here. It's really smart. And you know what they say about smart people and stealing stuff? I can't remember the exact saying, but it's a good one. This is a really clever, very compact system for creating incrementing redstone power. So you can see there's 0 power here. Send in a signal, and now 1 redstone power is activated. Send in another signal, 2 redstone power. You can sort of imagine how this is being used. By incrementing redstone power, you can turn on 1 piston after another after another. So when an armor stand gets fired, it comes all the way over here. This signal then activates one of these pistons to push it over and drop it down here. But now that piston is activated, which means the next armor stand to come through has to go into the next block. So it'll be 1 half block over, and so on. So yeah, then this is incremented, but as you can see here, every time an armor stand gets sent forward, we don't actually want it to go forward a block every time. We want to go forward half a block. So how do we do that? We just have the old type of binary counter, which is just a sticky piston and a block. An important point as well is that the armor stand gets dispensed onto a carpet, which means the armor stand is 1 pixel higher than these blocks, which means it will smack into this block, stopping it, which means it's able to get fired forwards. Now we need 2 more things. We need to reset when you finish the line, and we need it to actually start on 1 block instead of starting from 0. So here, for instance, we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need a head start of 5 blocks or 5 power levels. And we can use our new favorite block, the crafter, to give it 5 power. If you power this block with a power level of 5 to begin with, you end up with a head start of 5 blocks. And then we want to be able to reset it. So that's pretty simple as well. If we just get rid of this target block, the whole thing goes to 0. This target block is crucial. We can just put in this system here, so that when this target block power reaches full, then this repeater will get pulsed, which will then pulse this sticky piston, tracting and retracting this target block, unpowering the whole system. This actually means that you can write partial lines, because if the line is full, this will automatically reset itself. But we can also set it so that when you press for a new line, which is what this, in this situation, what this note block does, it will power this, power this, power this, blah, 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 which also resets this. So let's just, as an example, I'm just going to write so this means in this setup, you can actually write half lines, because if I press this button, the whole thing goes up, and this gets sent back to the start. So now you can start a new line again. Great! I think that's everything. Yeah, I hope you found this interesting. I'll put the world, like I said, I'll put the world download in the doobly-doo. A lot of servers will have the data pack from Vanilla Tweaks for player heads. Of course, for both of these versions, it means you have to unalive yourself. I'm not sure what you're supposed to get. You can get away with on YouTube. It means you're going to have to do that a load of times on a server. For this version with the actual buttons, a lot more times. So you might want to invest in making one of those killing machines that they've made on. They've made a few on Hermitcraft. They're pretty easy to make. I could always do a tutorial on that if you really wanted. But yeah, that's how you get loads of player heads anyway. And I'll stick the images in the description so you can just download them if you want. Thanks again for watching. Like and subscribe if you found this interesting. Feel free to download the world if you want to do that. Or, you know, build it. That would be so fun to see that in people's survival worlds. I plan to build this in my main world. I'm not sure when I'll do that though. For people who are interested, I am so close to finishing my PhD. I have finished my first draft of my thesis, hopefully sending it off in a month, maybe a bit more. We'll see. When I'm done, get prepared. I'll have so much free time. I've already got like 2 videos already basically done. Get ready to be annoyed by how much you see my pixelated face. Great. Well, I think that's everything.